Hi, I'm Samantha Nzesi.
It's your boy, Roy George Phillip, the first.
And this is Masculinity. Oh, damn. Pew, pew, pew. I can't do it as well as Roy, you guys, but this is Masculinity.
I've been practicing.
For how long?
Ever since we started. Season 2, y'all.
Yeah.
It was rough then. Not to say it's much better now, but...
Well, listen, thank you guys for being back. Second episodes of season 3 modules.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Sam was all about the modules like from the jump, and we're
From
just
the
getting
beginning.
it now.
I know. We had to kind of get our feet wet. We had to understand what the fuck was going on. We had to see,
Curve.
you know,
Modules
what people
is a
were
hard
going to
word
do.
to say.
Modules.
Module.
I weirdly really like it.
It's kind of sexy.
Module. It sounds interesting in French. In French, it just
Wow.
sounds like, I don't know, something that you have to. Anyway, you guys. So we're excited to have made it to our third season, and we just want to thank you for listening, and most importantly, we just want to
thank you.
Yo, this is crazy. People actually are like engaged in this conversation and are like down to see it continue.
I mean, the world's getting a little bit better, and I like to think it's all us, even though I know it's not all. It has nothing to do with us. We're just a small, tiny part, but thank you for listening.
Yeah,
thank you for being
guys.
part of the conversation.
Thank you for being part of the conversation. Thank you for doing the work. Like, I really, for the people who have reached out to us, like, it's very clear that this is something that's really, that, you know, the performance of masculinity and just gender dynamics in general are very important to you. And you're really...
Yeah, we just really appreciate your energy.
Yeah. Oh, God. You guys, Ramoy hates the word energy, but I know that it was a heartfelt appreciation. Anyway,
So today's show,
today we're going to explore the ways that our emotions and the way we process them are impacted by our notions of masculinity. So when we think of masculinity, why is it considered normal for that to be emotionally disconnected? And is it actually true that people who consider themselves masculine are emotionally disconnected? Right? Like, are we actually giving space for masculinity to include emotional vulnerability? And finally, what is the incentive to changing our ways? Like, why would we even be having this conversation?
boo.
I mean, honestly, it's so widely accepted and understood as a matter of fact that masculinity is not expected to include emotional expression. And we've built all of our systems and models around that, honestly. And
Yeah, I mean, this is like exceptionally rich and going to be a learning experience for me, this particular module, because I think I can be very stoic, and it's potentially because of masculinity. And so then we have to ask ourselves, and I have to ask myself, honestly, you know, when does masculinity allow for emotions to be shown? When can I show my emotions? When can we think, you know, acting masculine, does that allow for like glee and happiness? This is like a really hard one for me, but like when does masculinity allow for people to show like real sadness? And I'm talking like tears. I'm talking like snot coming out of your nose tears, like open sadness.
when does it?
Yeah, but then let's talk about like when does actual masculinity force people to not show their emotions?
Yeah.
Like what are those type of emotions that masculine individuals, men, whomever, are limited in showing their emotions? And I think
because I think that like if we were to think about emotional expression as a spectrum, right? Like
Sure.
with glee on one end and just like, I guess, anger on the other.
just say like
devastation.
distraughtness. Yeah, devastation.
Yeah, like, you know, you've got like disappointment. Everything is going to show up along the spectrum, but in the middle. So as a dude, you know, as a person who is considering themselves to be a masculine person, you know, disappointment, sadness, confusion, whatever, that's not really masculine. It's not really considered like that strong or that
Talking about like that model that masculinity teaches us is, you know, be strong, don't be weak. That simple binary model. And so everything gets funneled away or partitioned off, siloed off in our spirits, and we express it predominantly through anger.
Anyway, so don't worry. So this is what we're talking about today, but don't worry. It's not just going to be Vermoy and I talking about this.
Yeah, thank God, because I don't have anything to say about emotions, because I just bury mine.
I can honestly say that that's not true. Actually, it is true. I don't know how one more feels ever.
Shout out to masculinity. Anyways,
Exactly. But we have a really special guest today who's going to really help us figure that out. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Robert Kandell, who is the host of the podcast Tough Love, where people get coaching on how to live lives they love by being free and open to be themselves. Which it sounds nice, right? That sounds great.
I wish I could just be myself.
That sounds free and open.
I'm excited.
It's nice. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
It's my absolute honor, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, let's get right into it. So there's so many things to engage with here because you have quite the rap sheet, I must say.
I like that. No one's ever called it a rap sheet, but that's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know.
Yeah, like I like to think I'm a little bit productive, and I like to think Samantha's very productive. But Robert, you're very productive.
You're quite productive.
You're doing putting a lot of content
awesome
out there,
things.
a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and very helpful stuff. So thank you again.
Oh, good. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, so because of that, there's so many things to engage with. But to start us off, I mean, how did you find yourself on this journey exploring masculinity?
There were two major motivators or things that happened in my 20s that sparked this journey. The first was I went to Burning Man at 28.
Fun.
Burning Man is a festival in the desert, if you've never heard of it, which now like 75,000 people go to. And for me, I really went at the request of my first wife. And what happened is some pretty epic things happened there that woke me up, that there was a whole other part of my brain and my personality and my soul I was not in touch with. Mm. And the second major thing was that I made an utter and total fool of myself at the first workshop I took about 6 months later.
Which workshop was that? Can we ask?
Yeah, of course. I'll, open book. So what happened was I was 20, going on to my 29th birthday. I was married, living the American dream, house in San Francisco, corporate job. Like everything looked great on paper, but underneath it, things were not looking so good. I was overweight. I was disconnected from my wife. We weren't having any sex. And it was really just the facade was good, but underneath was turbulent. And so my wife called me up at my corporate job and says, "Hey, do you want to take a class on sex?" And when you're not having sex with this attractive woman, you don't know why, the answer is yes.
Yes.
And it really came out like, yes.
Shout out to your wife.
Yeah. So about 10 days later, I ended up in this workshop in a circle full of strangers. It was a guy named Erwan Devan, who's still teaching in San Francisco. And we're doing introductions and saying who we are. I go first. And then I start my little monologue. And I speak for 3 or 4 minutes, and I thought I was funny and intelligent and clear. I thought everyone would clap. I thought the teachers would make room for me on the couch. And instead, Erwan said, "Hey, do you know your wife's crying?" Mm. And she was sitting right next to me. And I had so much attention on myself and so little attention on her. And I was so misogynistic and chauvinistic that I never even realized. And she finally felt safe enough to show it. She was crying. And then Erwan did the worst thing possible. He said, "Okay, who's next?" And so
what?
I got to sit in the burn of that for the next 2 hours of other people's introductions. And I realized I had a choice. Option number one was to get up and leave and go back to what I knew, the status quo. Option number two was to stay and learn. And in that moment, I made the commitment that I was going to understand this part of myself. And that was the driver, 20 years later, for this really epic life I've had since then.
Wow. I mean, that's quite the story. So I kind of want to get into the nooks and crannies of that. I'm just wondering, in terms of, we've been talking about the spectrum of emotions, right? And so you're noticing, your wife there at the moment. And we're seeing how the performance of masculinity really limits people from holistically engaging with that spectrum. And so in that moment, you're connected to how you haven't been paying attention to her. You're connected to all these things. Like, how do you then channel that to understand how to kind of coach people on those things? Like, how does that work?
Okay. Well, I have a framework that goes across all my work, from business consulting to personal consulting. So the first step in any change is to confront.
Mm.
You need to stop and see. So for me, I confronted by making a fool of myself to expose this lack of connection, this lack of awareness inside of me that my wife cried. So it was just, you confront, you take down your blinders, you slow down enough to see. That's the first step. The second step is to investigate, to be willing to do the work to see what's this about. Is this, what is chauvinism? What is codependence? What is communication breakdowns? We live in an information-rich world where there's so much information available for you. And so go and look and read other people's, listen to podcasts like this, and really, get a clue of what's out there. That's the second step. The third step is the most important on some level, and that's to commit, to say, I want to make a change. Because people only change when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're like fine being out of shape, then you don't go to the gym, but if it's hard for you to look in the mirror every day, then you go to the gym. It's like when we're motivated, we get off our butts and do things. So that's 3. 4 is to build a practice. 5 is to complete the cycle, debrief, and then decide to go back in. So it's a process of really just seeing, committing, doing it, and then up-leveling your life.
Okay, so I do want to contextualize that in when we're talking about emotion, right? Because so when we're actually interacting with one another, emotions aren't expressed in a vacuum, right?
Correct.
So like,
well, I want to challenge. I want to ask a real question here. I may be going a little bit off script, but backtracking to that moment when the leader of that group tells you that your wife is crying, what was your immediate internal response to that? What I'm asking is looking at when you see your wife crying in front of all those people, in front of that group, what was the feeling you felt?
Okay, so it's funny. It was March 20th, 1999. So I remember the moment, like it's burnt in my system. It's just like I got it. So I was so happy with my talk. Do you know your wife's crying? That turn of the head to see her crying was like one of those movie montages that take forever. Like dun, 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 like really slow. She was crying, and she looked at me with these eyes that were really wide. And I remember her red cheeks, and I remember the tears, and I remember then her holding my gaze for maybe a second or two. It felt like a minute, but it was very brief. And then she turned her head away from me to look at the teachers. And I felt so alone. Then I turned my head to look at the teachers pleadingly, please help me fix this.
Sure.
And Erwan, he's a friend of mine. He's actually a client of mine now, but he's a friend of mine. And he was looking with his really intense eyes with no expression on his face. And then I was like waiting for the next step. And he says, great, who's next? And then turned his attention. And then I had like the record player start to feel like I got mad at Carol for putting me in this position. I got mad at Erwan for not taking care of me. I got mad at the people in the class for not supporting me. I was like anger. And then I was like, wait a minute.
No, and I think that's incredibly important. And obviously, it's nuanced and a complex experience. So it's not just one specific thing. But I think it's very important because we have to be honest. Like emotions, they aren't felt and they aren't expressed in a vacuum. They're actually shared with others. And I wonder if there's a part of that experience as you, as a a man or someone who is masculine identifying, that sees your wife crying and who's able to at point like express her emotions so openly and cry publicly, and there's a part of your subconscious or unconscious or maybe even your conscious self where that anger triggers because you can't, or that you have learned to temper your emotions or not publicly show your emotions, and there's almost like some resentment that comes out of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, we want to get mad at things that we don't feel comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am now a co-parent or a stepfather to two girls. They're now 8 and 10, and their expression of their emotion, their expression of their neediness, their expression of their a want and their desire is very uncomfortable for me. It's very inappropriate. And from them, I learn. Like, I go back to my own childhood and how my parents treated me. And so it really is, men are not taught to interact with their emotions. We're actually taught to push it down, to put it into a box, to put it into our shadow. And I think pretty much every modern problem has to do with the pushing down and inaccessibility to these powerful things called emotions.
Well, then, okay, then if that's your response, how do we transform the culture? How do we transform our environment, our modern day world that says that masculinity can include vulnerability and can include being emotional and being emotionally expressive and emotionally understanding, and that be strong versus that being like looked down upon as weak?
Right. Well, it's a changing of. Well, let me answer it this way. There's two ways that people change. There's inspiration and there's desperation. My life changed because out of desperation. Like, really, in that moment, I was desperate to not be the guy who made his wife cry in a room full of strangers. So I was desperate. My hope in the work I do is to inspire. And I do that by putting myself first with all the mistakes I make constantly. I've been doing this work for 20 years. I am really good at communication. I understand women. Like, I'm deep in this practice, and I still make mistakes with my wife. And when it happens, I apologize. I learn. I apologize. The point is that we need permission to expand. We need permission inside ourselves. And so my viewpoint of how to create this in society is to create frameworks that men can understand, have role models that men can look up to, create practices that are fun and enjoyable, and really start to create play in terms of how to up-level lives, because in play, people tend to have more fun. And in more fun, they tend to stick to the practice, and then relationships and lives can change.
That's really awesome. That's a perfect segue, I think, to this working together, right? Because I think a lot of the things that you've mentioned, at least that I've heard you talk about and just interact with on the show, has to do with the way that masculine and feminine communicate, in the ways that we can kind of transform the bequeathed ways of communicating and update them to actually fit what we're looking for. And so, we've talked a little bit about that on the show, but this is really we really want to actually ask your help in deepening that. Like, what can you explain what that might look like, or like, where do you start with being able to make that type of inspired or desperate change?
So many different ways to answer this question. So I think the first thing is to give people reality. And what I mean by that is they're feeling something. They feel like the only person with this thought. They feel isolated. It's called terminal uniqueness. Wow. I'm the only person with this affliction. So the research I've done, done a lot of extensive research, read some great books and articles. The world has epically changed in the last 40 years in terms of man-woman relating. So 1848 was the women's suffrage movement. The first time someone said out loud, hey, women should be equal with men. As the patriarchy started about 6,000 years ago, 1848 was the first time that people were like, we should make women equal. It took 70 years to 1920 for the 19th Amendment to be ratified, where women could vote. So that was 100 years ago. Yeah. About 40 years ago, in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, the school system started to create programs for equality with women, or girls, to be specific. I use girls deliberately as females below 18. And so they started to create programs to up-level women's education, especially around STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so what's happened in the last 40 years is you see significant changes in terms of women's power rising in the world. They're not equal. I'm not saying they're equal. I'm just saying changes.
Yeah.
At the same time, they created programs for women or girls to up level. They did not create complementary programs for boys around things that were needed in the 21st century: communication, empathy, emotional intelligence, awareness. And so as women are rising up in power, men are pretty much staying the same. And you look at statistics that show, like, in the 1970s, like 68% of college entries were men. Now it's flipped.
Yep.
Women are dominating the school system from grade school to graduate school. And so what's happening is there's a rise of women, and men don't know what to do.
Yep.
And instead of men saying, okay, I've got a great new game, they're actually giving up, extending their adolescence and extending their boyhood, and not stepping up to the challenge to rise up to meet the change in women.
Well, I want to add something to that, because there's a, and maybe you're getting to it, but there's a level that I was actually having this very conversation today, and we're not connected to what it is that's having men and boys not excel at the level that they should academically or professionally or whatever it is. And you know, when we're talking about, like, you know, extremes like death by suicide, and we realize that the largest group that's actually killing themselves are men of a certain age, because they don't really know how to be useful in society anymore.
Yes.
And then you're also operating within a system that tells you, as a young boy or a young masculine person, that you know, as somebody who is supposed to be masculine, you just got to take it on the chin. You can't really talk about that. You can't talk about it. You can't talk about the fact that you don't feel comfortable, you know, asking questions in school. You can't talk about that. That's not what guys do.
Well, you're speaking my language, 100%. So thank you. You know, the book I'm writing is called Unhidden, a book for men. Yeah, it's Unhidden, a book for men and those confused by them. And I really wrote it for all genders. It really is male focused, to give them alternative viewpoints of their life they're leading, to see how they can up level their lives. It really is a pragmatic guide for a guy, for a man or a boy, a young, whatever, however you are, to look at your life and the things that have been fed to you, the programs that you've lived in, the society you've swam in your entire life, so you can have awareness and then make change. But it's also written for all these people who love men, are just confused by what's happening, to give them a clue, so we can get back to collaboration, so we can get back to connection. There's so much anger between the genders. You know, I'm 100% supporter of that anger. I think it's warranted. And to get to the next level, the only way it's truly going to work is in collaboration. And so understanding each other, putting down our swords, and, you know, that we used to fight, their antagonistic communication, start to collaborate, start to forgive, and in that, everyone's lives will be enhanced.
What's the first step to that? Like, so, I mean, oh, actually, you talked about this, right? This is like where your methodology comes in,
right?
Of like
confrontation. And I can break it down to a relationship. Yeah. So let's just say, woman and man love each other, been together for a couple of years, and yet find themselves constantly fighting or constantly missing each other. You know, it could be that, you know, in their relationship, the woman has really risen up or found her power, and the guy has kind of stayed the same. And there's just this disconnection. It's kind of like creaky, like the communication's not landing. The thing to up level that would be one of them, either one, saying, I see in our relationship that there's a lot of love, but it's not as intimate or deep or connective as I want it to be. I love you. I want to get closer to you. I want to know you. I want you to know me. And I want to just say that I can feel that we're not at that electric spark that we had when we first dated. Okay. And then you just shut up. So that's a form of confronting. That's a form of just saying, this is what's happening. If the other person says, I don't know what you're talking about, or you're crazy, why are you trying to make me feel bad? If they get into that defensive mode, then quite honestly, for the person bringing this to the couple, I would just say, you might want to really think this relationship out. Hopefully the person be like, yes, I have the same feeling all the time. It's frustrating. I don't know what to do. If they're in connection, the first step of confronting will create intimacy, because you're bringing the charge that lives hidden underneath the surface to the surface, bringing it forth, vulnerably sharing, not blaming, but just describing, and then intimacy will rise just from the declaration of what is.
In terms of like the first step really is to, I mean, because I'm seeing that there's like might be like a step before that. Like, let's say if this is coming from the masculine part of the relationship, like you're going to have to do the work to get yourself to a point where you can cough up that fur ball to yourself, so that then you can also build whatever vulnerability or whatever is required in order to have that conversation with your partner.
Right.
Understanding that there can be, and that's the thing. I think that when we're talking about, masculinity and emotion, there's that piece, that's that uncomfortability that's required of yourself with yourself first, before you can then have that conversation and be real with somebody else about it.
Right. So yes, that's even a deeper confrontation.
Yeah.
That's a self-awareness. That's a belief in yourself that you're worthy, that your worth in the relationship is enough that you can actually have that conversation. Like, so yes, it's really important to have that step of, I'm not going to live the rest of my life like this. Like my first wife, Carol, who got me in that room, said to herself, she told me this later, I wasn't going to live in a sexless marriage. And that's what it was looking like. Yeah. I was going to do something. And so I asked her to take a class on sex. And, like her courage, she was my white rabbit, because unlike her, I just thought this is the way it was. Like I wasn't going to do any work. It really was her to say, this status quo is not acceptable to me. Let's work on it. And I was a yes. And then the whole world changed from that one yes. But the point is like we can do this for each other. We can do this for ourselves. We don't have to say you're bad. We can just say, I want more. There's an up level. There's an optimization. There's more mastery. There's deeper connection. There's better sex. What we're going on is good. Let's make it better. Let's make a game of it. Let's have fun with it. And that's where lives can change, in that energy.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about like relationships some more there, and like especially initially when we're talking about having that kind of confrontation kind of experience. Like a lot of my emotions, especially when a relationship is where I could express my emotions, but a majority of the time my emotions came out as anger, and that's kind of something we've already been talking about in this conversation about how masculinity teaches men or individuals who identify as masculine to channel majority of any of and all of their emotions they feel into anger. And the most optimal place that is seen or that is enacted or that is expressed can be potentially within a relationship, whether it's with a romantic partner, or it could kind of an extreme experience where it's with a person that you're like seeing, dating, it doesn't go well, or a potential partner like slights you or turns you away. And then that can turn into something extremely extreme, which we've seen on the news at times, where individuals take that and channel that into the most extreme of anger and into the most extreme violence.
And then again, it's back to that terminal uniqueness of, that's how men are trained in our society to express themselves. Like we're not allowed to cry, except when an animal, a pet dies, or we lose a sporting event. Like there's very few times we're allowed to cry, and we're not allowed to feel jealous, or we're not allowed to feel envy. We're not allowed to really even happiness. Like guys have trouble hitting the upper bounds of happiness. So the first thing I would say is confront this and see that this is a cultural piece. Then the second step for a guy is just to say, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
I want more. I'm happy with the way things are. I'm not happy, but things are good. Let's make them better. You can't go from bad to better. You can only go from bad to good. and then from good to better. So start where things are good and you want to make them better. Then your better becomes good and there's another better. The point is like that's the step. But it does take, really to your point of it does take that things are not the level I want. I want to be connected to my empathy. I want to be connected to my fear. Because that's really where power is. And that's the ironic part is that men shut down their power by not being connected to their emotions.
Yep.
I think Samantha says that all the time. Vulnerability is power, yeah.
Yeah, it truly is.
So here I want to kind of bring something up that I've been reluctant to bring up on the show because I'm not sure. I mean, kind of. I'm not sure how popular of an opinion this is going to be, but we're talking about masculinity. So for the sake of this conversation and making it kind of more simple and black and white, and I know that's a binary, but I'm going to do it just for this, is when we're talking about like men being vulnerable, right? And being able to actually have that confrontation with the self and then with their partner and being able to come forward and be like, listen, this isn't working for me. I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling that way, and I want more. So one of the things that I feel we don't talk enough about in that dynamic is the reception of the woman or the feminine partner in the equation, right? So like what would be required in order for the relationship to even allow that? Because I think a lot of times we're not really talking enough about how feminine partners, women partners are really complicit in upholding the performance of masculinity that is extremely unhelpful and detrimental to them in the long run.
Sure. Yeah, all circumstances are co-created. All relationship issues are co-created. Now, I'm not saying equally co-created. You can have a very toxic male, but a woman who stays in the relationship, and women stay in toxic relationships for multiple reasons. So, but every situation really is co-created. I'm not trying to blame women in this. I'm just saying there is a level of responsibility. If you're in a relationship, in most countries, you're not forced to be there. So the thing the feminine or the woman can do inside the relationship to foster this is to make it safe for the guy to show all sides of himself to her. Make it safe. Now, men are tricky because we tend to have stoic faces. We're trained, to take beatings, emotional beatings, and not show it. We're trained to, grin and bear it.
Yeah,
no
I'm nodding
pain,
my
no
head
gain.
the whole time.
Yeah. And then in that, we're confusing. So I'll tell you a story. We taught a course, organization I ran called One Taste. And we ran a course called What 10 Women Want You to Know. And in their course, there were 10 very attractive, very powerful women in the front of the room and 15 to 18 guys in the semicircle. And Nicole and these 9 other women laid charged viewpoint after another. Boom, 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 boom. And the guys never showed any emotions, like ever. And so they kept going. They're like, all right, they're fine. And more viewpoints and more viewpoints and more viewpoints. And the course ended and we thought everything was fine. And then I kid you not, they walked outside the sidewalk of the center and they got into a fist fight 5 minutes after the course between 2 guys. We had to go and break up a fist fight. Okay, that was the first one. Okay. I kid you not. The second time we run the course, a couple months later, taught the course, same thing happened. One of the participants tried to bite the leg of Nicole. Like I was there. I'm the one who grabbed his head before his teeth could get in touch with her thigh because he was close. He I don't know what happened. He went to his knees. He started to move towards biting her. And I grabbed him like some instinct. And then we're like, okay, yeah. We're like, maybe there's something up with this course if there's violence afterwards. And so what I learned and what we learned was that guys will not show fear. We're trained not to show fear. It's part of our hunter personality. And so because of that, we fool women to think everything is fine. We're not scared, but we are shaking inside. We are full of fear. We are full of angst. We are full of anger. But we don't feel safe with you because we figure if we show our emotions, you're going to think we're a pussy, to use a bluntest word as possible, and you're going to leave. And so we can't trust you because probably girls and women and mothers and sisters have told us our entire lives not to show it.
Yeah.
So the antidote is to sit with your man and say to him, in whatever way feels good to you, I want to know all of you. I know you may have never had an opportunity to show your different emotions. Like you may not be able to show your fear. I want to know that part of you. I want you to see every single thing inside of you so we can have the deepest, most intimate relationship. I want to make sure it's safe. And if I don't make it safe, please let me know how I can do that. Now, he might not understand the offer at first, but if you keep creating a safe space for that to come out, then the truth will come out. And then it's like a Pandora's box. And all this muck and goo can come out and there can be healing. Now, of course, this is the same meant for women. It's the same thing. I want to know all of you. I want to hear all of you. I want you to feel safe with your emotions. And that's, to me, is mandatory to have a deeply intimate relationship, is a place where the truth can be told and rewarded. Even the really tough stuff, the truth can be told and rewarded.
I love that. And I love that you flipped it too, because, you know, contrary to popular belief, women do have an extremely hard time showing emotion as well. Ramoy's scrunching his face. It's true. Vulnerability is a thing for women as well. But I mean, that's not what we're talking about today, but we'll go back to it.
Part two.
Part two, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, you touched a little bit on one taste, and like I appreciate that you shared what you shared, because it kind of covers what I was going to ask you, just in terms of, so for those of you who don't know what one taste is, well, actually, can you tell us what one taste? I want them to hear from the horse's mouth.
Yes, I co-founded One Taste in 2004 with a woman named Nicole Dedon. She was the brains, I was the brawn. She just had this idea about bringing conscious, deliberate, overt conversations about sexuality into the world conversation and have a safe space for that to be told. We had a practice called orgasmic meditation, or oming, which is a deliberate partner practice around sexuality, which I could talk about more if you like. And then from the practice and from our work and from our research community, we built a whole technology around how to live what we call, for marketing sakes, orgasmically, how to live fully in your power. And then from that, communication and man-woman dynamics and intentions and relationship and desire and all these other courses came out of it, but really came from this concept of giving yourself permission to let the energy that's inside of you, that we called orgasm, flow through your body out into the world, instead of it being hidden in the bedroom under the covers without talking.
So you have these conversations, right? You've got people like getting into fights and all kinds of things. So how do you then bring it back so that this can then be channeled into a proper, like, not, I don't want to say proper, but just like a more productive, constructive way of communicating and a way of interacting?
So what happens is people don't feel free to speak their truth. They push down their emotions, men more than women, but women certainly all the time. And so we push these things down, and then we have cracks in our armor where all of a sudden it all floods out. And at that point, it's kind of putrid, right? So that's why we fight when we drink a lot. Or when we have a little fight about something, all of a sudden we're screaming at each other about something that happened 6 months ago, because we store all the stuff's in our system. And so the way to avoid this is to create this safe space where people can speak their charge in the moment with as much responsibility and say, this was the impact on me. This is how I'm feeling. This is what it's bringing up. This is what it's reminding me of. And sometimes, you need to go to your therapist. You need to go to your coach. You need to talk to your girlfriend. You need to have some kind of output. You need to journal. And so it's really taking the idea and distilling it down, but then communicating to your partner, when you do this, this is a negative impact it has on me. Can we come up with a more ultimate solution? And if you have a willing partner that's like, wow, I didn't know that, Thanks for telling me. I had no idea. Okay, of course I don't want you to be uncomfortable. Of course I don't want you to be sad. Let's work at it. And then that's where the up-level relationships happen.
Wow, I mean, I feel like this feels nice. Like, just the way that you took us through that feels nice. I feel like there's like an actual way to create spaces and room and relationships on both ends for people to really have honest conversations and really constructively build together, or not, right? Like, but like at least understanding our choices and like being able to act accordingly. So thank you. So where can the people find you?
Yes. Everything can be found at my website, robertkandell.com. You can have access to my podcasts and my writing. My social media links are there.
Awesome.
You can buy the book. So you can buy the book off Amazon or Audible. I am working on the audio book. And you can get 3 chapters of the audio book for free just by signing up for the mailing list and get a feeling for it. So that's available as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So we'll definitely be putting that on the website for you guys so that you can access all of Robert's work. And so where you guys can find where we're going to put Robert's stuff, right? We are at MASKulinity Podcast on Facebook, MASKulinity Pod on Twitter, that is with a K, and MASKulinity Pod also on Instagram for the IG folks out there. So listen, we just want to thank you guys for engaging in this conversation. Robert, thank you again for dropping the knowledge on us today.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the time, both Robert and our audience. It's a pleasure to be helping facilitate this conversation, facilitate a connection with voices like Robert to individuals who may have never heard of Robert or heard of the incredible work he's doing. So Thank you again, Robert. Thank you again to our dope-ass audience, who, no matter your gender, no matter how bottled up your emotions are, no matter how open you are with them.
We love you.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. So you guys, thank you so much for listening. We'll be sure to post everything out there. And again, my name is Samantha Nzesi.
It's your boy, Ramoy George Phillip, the first.
And this has been MASKulinity. Thank you for listening.
Peace.
Ciao.